Welcome to day 3 of the From Behind to Learning Progress Learning Challenge. I'm Dolly Freeman, and over the last couple days, I have been sharing with you tools from my actual tool belt as a homeschooling mom to help you to progress your children no matter how far behind they are. So if you've this is the first time you're in today, I just want to say welcome. I want to encourage you to go back over the first 2 days. They are going to really help set the platform of what this is going to be building on. But you can actually get a lot just from today. So I'm so excited that you're here joining me on this special series. And in that, today I'm going to be talking about the number one reason your child isn't motivated to learn. And in this training, I'm going to be teaching you the reason why your child isn't motivated, the problem with most curriculums, and the secret to getting your child motivated. So if that sounds of an interest, you're in the right place, and I'm encouraging you to stick to the end because I have some really great things to share with you. So before I get started, I want to share a little bit about my experience with our son, who by the time I had decided, and yesterday I shared a lot about how I struggled with our second child. And if you missed that, you're going to want to look at debunking the myth about your child will learn when they're ready. So, in that, I talked about how so many within the homeschooling community who had children who were behind were making it acceptable to believe that it's normal, just because it's common, that it's normal that our children are not learning at an earlier age. Now, in yesterday's topic, I actually shared with you about why I thought, no, this isn't quite right. And it boils down to this one statement: practice makes progress. And so I'm going to pick up with that today, and I'm going to continue building on that so that when you leave today, you're completely understanding what needs to happen in order to motivate your children to learn. Now, um, back when I had decided to go ahead and go all in on committing to a full year of getting my struggling learner to progress in his studies, basically his reading, we're focusing on reading that 1 year, I realized that he had developed some behavioral issues in the process. Now, not necessarily behavioral in the fact that he was disobedient to me, but rather that he had formed habits of distraction. And those distractions were obvious when I had gotten up to go tend to his younger brother or his sister, or even done a few things around the house. When I came back, there was no progress done in that lesson. And so when we look at all of the problems that might be causing your child to be unmotivated in their learning, you need to look at behavior as well as if there's learning challenges, but also how you're developing that environment for learning within your home. So what I ended up doing is realizing that in that time, I need to be consistent and intentional in how I was using the hours of our homeschooling. He needed me to sit next to him to form the habits of attention. And in that, it helped me to be able to move the progress forward. His age said that I should be able to let him sit and do things more independently, but the results were proving that he had that habit of distraction that was keeping him from staying focused in order to build on that momentum. Now, I'm going to tell you one day how all of that changed, but that I want to tell you towards the end. So before I get to there's some things I want to really share and shed light on as we're moving into this challenge. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about how I honed in and committed to practice makes perfect, and how that mindset made the big difference in our child's ability to stay focused and motivated. the Lord, when during this time, I stopped and I prayed and I really asked the Lord for wisdom and direction, because let's face it, I was losing a lot of my own confidence. Even though I had successfully taught children to read as a kindergarten teacher, I had taught my first child how to read, and this child I was struggling with. And so and he was 11 or 12. I can't remember the exact time that I said, you know what, I'm committing this complete year to getting my child to read before the end of the year. And that was my goal. So, having that goal, I needed to feel confidence myself, but also having some type of wisdom of where to start and what to do. So in my prayer, I was just really seeking the Lord on that wisdom and direction. And he reminded me of when my child was 7.5 years old. And in that time, my son would be going outside. He would come in, he would grab the adult field guides off the shelf, and he would try really hard to read. This was at 7.5. And so at that point, I began to realize something that was so important to every person's educational path, regardless if they're struggling or if their success is in a subject that one child struggles with. So, that reason your child isn't motivated is because they lack interest. My son at 7.5 years old had the interest of knowing the name, the habitats, the food that something ate that he had found while exploring in our backyard. That interest is what gave him that motivation to try to sound out words. And when the Lord reminded me of that, I realized that, wait a second, Charlotte Mason spoke about this in her original writing, and I began to fill in the gaps of what that looked like. Charlotte Mason always said that your curriculum needed to earn eager attention. And that eager attention is what was not happening when I would get up and leave my son to himself in his lessons, because he had formed the habit of distractions. I had allowed that by letting too much time go in between, and I needed to correct that by being beside him. But the only way to keep his attention, even when I was beside him, was to make sure that his curriculum was of interest. So I'm going to give you a tip here that you really should be writing this down if you are struggling with your children, because you want to come back to this and really nail it. All right. So there's a couple things. So if you are struggling with behavioral issues, whether it is distraction or downright disobedience and the child just not wanting to do what you tell them to do during those lessons, you have to understand that some of these actions could very well be tied to the fact that your child is behind and it's connecting with their emotions, and they're not really sure how to regulate those emotions in verbal understanding of telling you what the struggle is. So they're acting out because they don't know how to explain how they're feeling about being behind. So the good thing about that is I teach you how to eliminate those behavioral issues inside the Solve Learning Challenge kit. But in addition, I walk you through how to understand how to motivate your children in a 5-day workshop that's included inside that kit. Now, I'm just going to post this kit in the comments so that you can quickly go and see about it when we're done with this. My heart is that you become equipped and able to solve those learning problems that's going on. So what I ended up doing that made so much difference is when I realized my son was motivated when he was learning or when he was interested, is where all of a sudden it hit me. I need to do something different. And so that leads me to the second point I want to teach you in this segment, is that the problem that your child is unmotivated is usually a curriculum. So if your child is not interested in your curriculum, they are bulking at the assignments, they're taking longer than it ought to take, those are signs that the interest is not there. Put your child in front of something that they're interested in, whether it be curriculum or not, you will see that their attention is there, even if it drags on for an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours. Hollywood shows us this. Our children, even if one, can sit in front of nearly 2-hour movie. So attention is possible as long as their interest is there. So what do we do? What do we do when we have planned the curriculum that are not getting the attention? Well, there's two parts, okay? So number one, I'm going to talk about today and what I did. Second part, I'm going to pick up tomorrow. So don't miss tomorrow's topic. All right, so you are going to want to realize that a lot of curriculum is watered down curriculum. Charlotte Mason talked of that as twaddle. Our children, our brains require the full idea, not just bits and pieces and water down and take it apart. They require, in order for our children and our brains to retain, is we need the full spectrum of the idea. We need to be able to see why, what, how, when, and if. Those are so important to us being able to retain. These are natural questions that when a curriculum cannot give us that fullness, it doesn't have the ability to build our interest. So that's number one problem with curriculum. The second thing is we're getting curriculum that may have interested someone else's family or we feel should be because it's simple and it's in a box for us and it's all done, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that is going to ignite and spark valid interest in our children to earn eager attention. So what I want you to do and what I did to overcome our struggles is to put in the place where they're struggling. For instance, our son was struggling with learning to read. So I used his interest that was already showing me that he would get an adult field guide off the shelf to learn how to read at 7.5. I coupled that with our curriculum plans, meaning this: everything that I gave to him had everything to do with animals because that was his love, is animals. So when I coupled his struggles with his interests, what ended up happening is I had earned his eager attention. And it was no longer about what his struggle was, but now about his interest was. And so he was willing to overcome those struggles because he wanted to know the answers to the what, when, where, how, and if. So by giving him that curriculum that answered all of those questions, aligning with his interests, that first year where I said, we're going to practice for progress. When we put that with his interests, guess what happened? You betcha. He completely went into progressing. The challenges he had before with curriculum that no longer interested his mind, guess what? His distraction habit disappeared and he was building the habit of attention. His attention span increased. So we were able to go from 5-minute lessons up to 20-minute lessons within a few weeks because he wanted more. And when that happened, it automatically ignited the passion for that next lesson. So I'm telling you, an interest-led curriculum is so important to overcoming the struggles. Now, what about those other things? Well, we'll talk about that tomorrow, so stay tuned. But what I want to tell you now is the secret to getting your child motivated. Now, this happened by pure circumstance. I was getting ready for our third child to be born. I knew that I could not be planning all summer long. I needed a way to be able to implement our plans and plan in a way that was simple. So if I was in the middle of nursing or changing a diaper or what have you, that our children could begin to take ownership and I would be able to breathe a little bit better and not spend the whole summer, the next summer, in planning. So I created what I called the grade notebook. So instead of having a teacher's planner where it had all the things I needed to do, I separated it into my daughter's grade and her assignments. And then I separated it into my son's grade and his assignments. Well, I had no idea, by simplifying things for me and being able to just look at a glance of what each child is responsible for and to make planning easier for me the next year, I also did something that I gave the ownership of our children's education to them. So here's what happened. Our daughter recognized that mom was a little busy at times. And she's like, can I go on to the next lesson? I know where to find my assignment. And so I would go, yep, go ahead. Your next thing's here. And she would go and she would look it up and she would go and do it. Well, once she got her hands on that checklist, some kids just love checklists, just like we moms do. When she got her hands on that checklist, she became completely motivated to go ahead and move forward. Now, that child was not behind in anything. She was a vivid reader. She loved assignments. She loved her schoolwork. But at the time, something happened. She loved an outdoor project that she and her brother were working on. And she wanted more free hours in the afternoon because the days were getting darker earlier. They were shorter. And she knew she had only but a certain amount of time to work on this project. Unbeknownst to me, she woke up at 6 or 6:30 in the morning. I'm not quite sure. And took ownership of her education, and she began working on all of her things. She knew how to read, she knew how to write, and so she took her assignments and she went forth with it completely on her own, 100% motivated. Now, here is what happened. I woke up that first morning, and not the first morning of the school year, but the first morning she took ownership of her education. And in that, she's like, I'm working my last assignment for the day. And I was like, there's no way you could be doing that. So doubting her, I went through her assignments, and sure enough, she was on her last one and she had done perfect execution in it. And at the same time, I'm working through to keep her accountable and verify and evaluate her assignments. Next thing you know, our son got up, our second son, the struggling learner. He had gotten up, and when he found out that she was on her last assignment and he had yet to have breakfast and he had yet to start, I had to deal with a meltdown because this was their project they were working on together. And I was not allowing one student or one child to go outside and do work or have free time without doing the work first. And so he knew that, and he began to cry. And I was like, you know what, mommy will get right into it. I won't worry about other stuff. And the morning routine, we'll get right into your school as soon as we have breakfast. Well, what happened the next day? He got up and he began to be motivated in his work that he knew he had the ability to do on his own. And we call that independent work. He knew he could do certain things. And then when he came across something that he did not know how to read, or he wasn't sure what it was, he would ask his sister while I was still sleeping with our relatively newborn. I mean, he was about a year, but he was still not, still needing mommy and keeping me up a little bit at night. So the key thing was he was motivated because there was a project that he wanted to work on with his sister, and he knew he had to get up earlier and to work on it. So you betcha, as soon as I got up, he was ready to do his other assignments. I checked his work. They had done it with perfect execution. And before you know it, that grade notebook became the motivation for our children to work. So here we are with his assignments that he had the ability to do, the confidence to do independently. We talked about the confidence baseline yesterday. He knew what he could do independently. He did them, but he also knew certain things he had to do with mommy. And so we worked on them real quick, and they earned those hours. That motivation of giving our children ownership of their education is one that I highly recommend, even if your children are behind in learning. Now, I will tell you, I'm putting the link where you can look into the grade notebooks. Here's what I want you to know about those. These are something that as soon as a child learns how to read, they can take ownership. However, my sons have proven to me that it doesn't matter if they read. They have the motivation to learn how to take ownership of it long before you give it. They want to check off their math assignments. They want to check off their memory work. They want to check off the things that they know where they are. So don't think that just because they're not reading or they're behind in something, they can't take ownership of it. They surely can. Okay, so the key here is that I want you to begin to work on in this challenge task is to determine your child's interest so that you can earn their eager attention to overcome their struggles. So remember, you're coupling their struggles, whatever they're struggling with their interest. And that is the key thing that you're going to have to work on in order to make sure that you are motivating your children. And then also consider adding your lessons into a place where you can give ownership to your children to take ownership of their lessons. They know what's required of them, in what order, and in how much time. And as long as they're having perfect execution and you're evaluating their work along the side, there's no reason for you not to do that with them. Now, if you haven't been able to get the kit, but you want to get started, I have a poster set for you, and I encourage you to go get that. That's at solvelearningchallenges.com. If you do want to get the kit, you can go to solvelearningchallenges.kit.com, and the poster sets will help you to influence your kids to show progress. These 3 posters will also help you to have the secret to identifying gaps in your children's education, as well as how to motivate your kids to love learning. These 3 posters are included inside the kit as well, but you can get those posters absolutely free just by putting your email in at solvelearningchallenges.com. Okay, so tomorrow is day 4 of the Behind to Learning Progress Challenge. And tomorrow we're going to be talking about how to influence your kids to be interested in your curriculum choices. This is one that you don't want to miss, because if you already have your homeschool plans laid out, but your children are just having behavioral issues, they're balking at what it is that you've assigned, or maybe they have the distraction habit full gear and you're really not grabbing their attention, let me show you in tomorrow's teaching about how to actually gain their earn their earnest attention and move forward with that. Okay, I'll see you in tomorrow's episode. I can't wait until then, but I hope you're enjoying this challenge. Until tomorrow.